The real estate sector faces particularly acute sustainability risks and accounts for nearly 40% of global carbon emissions. Unlike most other carbon-intensive sectors, investment and ESG objectives are generally aligned in real estate, as sustainability initiatives reduce operating costs and are linked to higher occupancy and rental rates. But how exactly do you measure how green a REIT is, and what does that data mean for the broader opportunity set? Hello, I'm Paul Murdoch, and joining me today to discuss the innovative Dow Jones Green Real Estate Indices are Michael Orzano, Head of Global Equities at S&P DJI, and Dan Winters, Head of Americas at GRESB. Dan, Mike, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Great, so Dan, can you start us off? What is a green REIT?
Well, it's a great question. And so when GRESB was started 10 years ago, the real estate industry was in the early stages of understanding what sustainability was and trying to implement plans and programs. Fast forward to today, GRESB has become a framework that's used globally by the real estate industry to put together programs and benchmark peer groups, one REIT against the other, on how they're doing with their programs on sustainability. Some REITs are doing a great job, others are just getting established and getting going. That real distribution of behavior in the marketplace is interesting from an investor standpoint. So I would say that there's a gradation of greenness, where some companies are doing a real strong job and others are just getting started.
So how then does GRESB measure how green a REIT is?
So GRESB was set up in an ISO 14000 approach of plan, do, check, act. So if you break that down, what a plan is from a REIT standpoint is, do you have targets and do you have policies that really inform your management philosophy on sustainability? From the doing standpoint, do you incorporate sustainability attributes and do energy audits when you're underwriting the building? And then once you own it, from an operational standpoint, what are you doing to drive down energy and water consumption, which has a bottom line effect on costs? What are you doing to raise the profile of the assets that have a top line impact when it comes to rental rates and occupancy? From the checking standpoint, do companies have an environmental management system and a sort of a close the loop construct to be able to track data and see how they're doing and with these improvements? And then on the act standpoint, to the extent that companies have targets, are they meeting those targets and exceeding them when it comes to carbon footprinting or being able to reduce their overall impact, their overall environmental impact?
Great, thanks, Dan. So Mike, taking a step back then, how and why did the Dow Jones Green Real Estate Indices come about?
So investors are increasingly incorporating ESG factors across their investment process, and real estate investors are no exception. Why is that? So we already mentioned that the real estate sector accounts for a large portion of global carbon emissions. In addition to that, buildings are long-lived, fixed, energy-intensive assets, so they're naturally at risk for a lot of key sustainability challenges in the long run. So why hasn't this been done previously? Why did it take us this long to get here, right? So the data has been a big challenge, and having GRESB become sort of an industry leader in this space and have that deep data set is really allowing us now to create indices for the marketplace.
So we finally have that rich data set. How does it incorporate into the index? How was it designed and how does it work?
Sure, so the overarching goal of the indices is to deliver a similar risk-return profile to a conventional real estate benchmark, but with an improved sustainability profile. So we have 4 regional indices, a global, a US, a global ex-US, and a Japan index. And for each index, the methodology is the same. So we basically take all of the companies that are in the relevant parent Dow Jones Select Real Estate Securities Index, and then we re-rate the constituents based on their ESG score as measured by GRESB. So we're overweighting companies that score the highest on GRESB assessments, and then lowering the weights of companies that are either relatively weak performers or not participating in the assessment at all.
So why did S&P DJI look to GRESB for that data set to incorporate?
Sure. So real estate is it's a specialized asset class. Because of that, it requires a specialized approach to evaluating sustainability. And GRESB has really defined that approach. I think GRESB has become the industry standard by incorporating a specialized assessment process for the real estate industry. And importantly, they also incorporate asset level data. So it's much more granular than the generalized approaches used by others. So we feel that incorporating that type of data, specialized data for the industry, makes the indices much more usable.
Great. So Dan, GRESB has over a decade of experience analyzing rich data sets. How have asset owners and asset managers used this data traditionally?
Well, from an institutional investor standpoint, they're really looking for best in class, wanting to understand what management teams can solve that, we call it the first mile problem, getting that asset level data in a structured way and in a reliable way that can then get rolled up to the portfolio. That's not an easy task, it's actually quite hard. So companies that can do that then are in a really good position to be able to understand what's happening well at the top of their portfolio, and then trying to translate that to the bottom of the portfolio where either they need some CapEx spend, or maybe the building engineers need some coaching, or whatever it is, right? To be able to take those best practices here and apply them down below. So what that does is that drives down risk. And what do institutional investors want are better risk-adjusted returns. Okay. On the flip side, those that participate in GRESB are oftentimes looking for a framework that says, okay, we want to be more sustainable, we get it, how do we do this? And then by doing it annually in GRESB is basically an annual assessment, so it's wash, rinse, repeat. So when you get your score in September, companies go through what I call management introspection. And they say, okay, well, how did we do this year? Where are some areas that we can see our peers are excelling or accelerating, and we're sort of standing there? How do we, make plans as we look out to the future to get better? And that's what GRESB is meant to do. The market-driven phenomena behind GRESB is really important to making it go.
Great, that makes sense. So then, Mike, with the indices, how does the creation of the index actually make it easier for asset managers and asset owners to do those types of assessment, and how broad's the range of applications and maybe even potential for future indices?
Sure. So what we've done is basically marry the GRESB real estate assessment data with an established real estate benchmark. So this allows index users to have a reliable benchmark to evaluate the relative performance of ESG performance of different types of real estate companies. Now we've started this process, in terms of designing indices with a low tracking error approach that we think has sort of a baseline index to have broad appeal. Now we do recognize that different segments of investors have different approaches, different definitions of sustainability. So with access to GRESB's deep data set, we're excited for the future to potentially create different iterations and future generations of indices to meet the varying needs of different types of market participants.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for your insights here today.
Good. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
S&P Dow Jones Indices is focused on the design of innovative index-based strategies across the ESG spectrum. To learn more about how indexing works for ESG, visit us at spdji.com. Thanks and have a great day.